Good morning, everyone. Kia ora koutou, ko Dairoli toko ingoa. Nō rua katuri, aho. No mai, haere mai, piki mai, kaki mai, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa. Good morning, my name is Dairoli. I am from the fabulous Ruakaturi Valley, from the mighty Wairoa Rohi. I bid a warm welcome to our councillors, to our manahiri, our guests. We've got plenty of guests joining us today, both in-house and online. So a warm welcome to you, and of course to our staff, and those of you who will be joining us online, both live and later as part of our recording. It is my absolute pleasure to guide you through today's agenda, the 11th of March 2026, and could I invite Councillor Waitoa to open our hui and lead us in Karakia.
Tēnā koe. O te rā kia koutou, ki te whenua e takoto nei, ki te whare e tū nei, he hono tangata. Tēnā koe, tēnā korua, tēnā koutou. Tīmata tātou ki tēnei hui, ki te karakia, whakatūwhera, kia hora te marino. Me e noi tātou, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa po namu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa, hui e tākie.
Kia ora, thank you. Housekeeping very quickly. This meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date via our YouTube channel. In an earthquake, drop, cover, hold. If the shaking is long or strong, morena, when shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately toward Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. For an evacuation, if an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area on the grass on the corner of Voltaire and Dalton Streets. Emergency exits are to my right here in the chambers and the doors that you came through, and the wharepaku, the toilets, are located down the hallway just beyond the chamber entrance. I call for apologies. I already have Councillor Hokianga joining us online, and he will be with us later in person. Are there any other apologies, please? I'd like to move that those be accepted, please. First, thank you, Haniwai. Second, Jock. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
I call for conflict of interest declarations, please. I would like to declare an interest in the Land for Life presentation later in today's as a pilot farmer within that program, and also I'm going to call it a strong alignment rather than an interest in the Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust, as I am the Hawke's Bay Regional Council representative on that committee and currently standing as chair. That brings us round to our fantastic guests today from the Karakia Community Catchment Collective. Welcome, welcome. Could I hand over to you first to introduce yourselves, and then we look forward to your presentation, roughly about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Just want to assure you that it's not my intention to attend every single public forum that you have. You'll be somewhat relieved to hear that, I'm sure. And just introducing Jeremy Absalom to you. Jeremy is a committee member of KCCC. The reason that we're here this morning is that we've wanted to talk to you about this issue for quite some time. However, just before Christmas, Jeremy and I both spoke at a meeting of Te Uru Kahika at Omartua, and the presentation that Jeremy's going to share with you this morning was part of what we presented to them, created really, really strong interest, and so we felt that it was important that we share it with you as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Cynthia. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks, Di. Just going to quickly share our little story from our catchment area from the cyclone and the impacts that the river had on our area. And so I'll take you through pictures. Not working. Try that. So this is the Mongoni River, and I'd like to acknowledge Craig Goodyear, who's one of your team, to help me bring a little bit of science to this frustration that I was having in terms of how we could actually demonstrate what happened. And it actually, the fact is it happened all within the boundary of our farm, which is Rissington Station. So we had three blockages occur, basically one at the Rissington Bridge, one about another 1.5 kilometres down, and then another blockage further down. So these are like beaver dams which fully stop the river in its tracks during one of the biggest rainfalls that we've had on record. So if I go to the first one, caused obviously massive channel. This was up against the river. And so here's the blockage here, here's the river. Don't know if most of you have been up the Rissington Valley. That was where the bridge was. That forced the debris that caused that bridge to fail, basically went back about 600 metres worth of debris was banged up against that, including many 20 and 30 tonne trees that were dislodged. And so really the bridge never really had a chance. That's what caused the destruction that obviously for the residents on this side and obviously down and around the hill on this side. That was what was left of the bridge afterwards, which was a few days later when I took that photo. We then had a second one which would have formed, we believe, fairly shortly after the first one. The thing that was staggering was on the side of this hill, when we were sitting at what we called ground zero in those days, we kept looking across at the vegetation removal on the side of this hill, and we're wondering why it had an upward trajectory. And the only reason we could come up with is because of the bow wave that was caused when that bridge broke. Must have forced the water to go like a kind of an ocean wave and stripped the vegetation off on an upward trajectory as it went from there and smashed into the side of that hill. Came down here and obviously immediately caused a second one. Now this one was what caused the most damage. So this one was roughly, so I measured these heights with the help of Craig. We were at, so the river sits at about 60 metres above sea level. The silt level up near all our buildings and outworks here had never had water around them in their history since the early 1900s. The silt level was at about 71, and I'll show you. So these are the buildings here. This is the track of the Mongoni River, forced everything up the Peka Peka Valley. So that water, so this is again thanks to Craig. These are all the heights that were given. And so if you look at, that was our office and shepherd's quarters. This is the barn, and this is the wool shed down here again. So that's the our office, our reception area, and that's the water level up on the top. And again, this is a building that's been there since 1904, albeit renovated. And that water was all from water that came back up the river, actually not going down. So it was very, despite the mess, it was actually very gentle. Our shepherd, her wallet actually lifted up, was left on a table. The table went to the roof, obviously, and then floated back down, and the wallet was still sitting in the middle of the table. So it was obviously very gentle, but obviously very destructive because the water sat there for probably 14 or 15 minutes. So that was kind of what was left. This is the wool shed, and you can see the water came up halfway across the second story on those clears. It was pushed back up the river, and so we were left with hectares and hectares of tonnage of area to be And I thought I'd just show you that picture, which is after we cleaned the whole place up. To do that was roughly 30 grand a hectare, to basically go through and remove all the massive vegetation. You needed 30-tonne diggers, and that's where I acknowledge the silt and debris fund was a game changer for us. The difference between 30 and 15 was the difference between doing it or not. And that's about to go back into productive land, albeit not quite as productive for a while, but it'll go back into pasture this season. And then finally we had a third one. Again, this was due to there was 4 poplars that were almost as if someone planted them to be perfectly across. And so all the debris must have come from the second blockage and pushed down here and held here. These dams were the second dam, we believe, was approximately 15 metres in height and about 150 metres across. And so the force of that breaking, I'm no engineer, so of course I went to ChatGPT and said, what's the force of that? And asked it to compare it to the rapids out of into the Waikato River from the Taupo. And it basically came up with it's almost 50 times for an instant, what comes out of that at peak when they release water into the Waikato. So it just shows, I guess it's the force, and what we found was everywhere where water was held up was where the most destruction was. And in places we were left with about 3 metres of silt that we were never able to remove, so we've simply just built back on top. And then from there, obviously that went straight out to the Tudaikuri River. So that's really the presentation. I guess from our perspective, we need a plan on river management, and I believe there's some good work going into the main rivers, but the feeder rivers, when that bow wave hit the Tudaikuri, it would have taken out the Dartmoor Bridge for sure, and the force of that hitting the Tudaikuri with those big trees in it and then going down on to hit the stop banks, we think it's very much an urban issue as much as it is a rural issue, because the force of that water loaded with such heavy artillery coming down that river, I don't think much. And just as we're going to build back all these beautiful new bridges, as I did say to one of the engineers, I said, you could argue we're building beautiful, even bigger dams for the future, and if we don't change the way we manage our waterways. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Cynthia. Very sobering reminder of how connected our catchments are. Could I invite Councillor Van Beek to connect with Jeremy and Cynthia and talk offline around some of the work that's being planned and underway? Is that okay? Did you want to make a comment now? Or?
Of course, many questions, because every situation is different, and why it's different is just what feeds into that. But absolutely, we are looking at the moment as a council, and we call it reimagining rivers. How should we manage our rivers? And that flood protection no longer is flood protection. We actually need to manage floods. So that's the journey we're on. And we definitely do see within that discussion with the public and the community that they actually want to focus on how we manage and how we operate in that space where you are, because that's the questions you ask. And so initially we were thinking more of values and principles around how we manage floods. We now actually have split out a group of people to actually look at the operational side of how we manage our rivers. And we just can't take them away from that thinking. And it's mainly landowners, farmers who want to have similar questions answered as you as well. So I think it's really important that we connect. And maybe already at this first instance, we should invite you to actually come to one of those community meetings where we do, and it's held here in the building, where we look at the operation and management of our river systems as they were, as they are, and how they should be in the future. And I think you'll have something really positive to contribute. So thank you very much for bringing this here. Thank you.
Thank you both. And just a reminder that the public forum is available for members of our community who have burning issues that they want to get in front of council. So well done taking it up. Lovely to have you with us again, Cynthia, and we'll look forward to seeing you next meeting. So, turning our minds to the rest of the agenda for today. This who marks the first committee meeting for our Environment Committee, and I'm thinking about, there are 3 for this year, and I'm thinking of them as a series. This is going to be a 3-part journey, exploring the foundations of our resilience across Aotearoa. We begin that journey today with a focus on soil conservation and erosion, issues that sit at the heart and the health of our whenua and the well-being of our communities. The impacts we've seen in recent years have made it clearer than ever, absolutely brought to front of mind with this presentation earlier. A very sobering reminder, Cyclone Gabriel has a very long tail, and we have most of our community, or many of our community, still very much living that. It's more than ever we need to understand soil and what best practice looks like. It's essential for building our resilience in our landscape and for our community of Hawke's Bay. To support this kaupapa, a field trip is planned for our regional governors next week. This is important that we provide an opportunity to meet with our communities at place, hear their experiences firsthand, and see the practical realities of soil management. These insights will help anchor our discussions and lived experience and strengthen the important decisions that we make around this table. As the year in the series progresses, our second hui will turn to water as our role in its kaitiaki, the pressures it faces, its central role in sustaining life and livelihoods. And our final session of this series will pull all those threads together and focus on biodiversity and biosecurity, bringing together the interconnected systems that uphold the health of our environment and our regional well-being. I want to be really deliberate and explicit in connecting this work that we do here to our Hawke's Bay Regional Council State of the Environment Report 2021-2025. I believe that's links being put in the Facebook chat, and you can also find it on our website. Of note today are pages 24 and 25. Councillors, it's also been put in the docs on tap for you to have a handy reference point. The opening statement of from that report, I just printed out the one page. The opening statement says, in the land chapter, in Hawke's Bay, many of our region's most pressing challenges and opportunities for growth come from the soil beneath our feet. This ties closely also with our Hawke's Bay Regional Council strategic priorities, reducing flooding, water security, land management. So a particular emphasis on land management pillar. However, you will see how this work does cross over. It transcends all 3 of those priorities. The land management pillar encompasses soil conservation and erosion control, water quality, biodiversity and biosecurity. Bingo, we've got all 3 covered. I want to be clear that when I refer to farmers and growers, that I'm using this term in the broader sense. Within your assumptions, I want you to think plantation foresters, native growers, cropping, sheep and beef farmers, dairy farmers, vegetable growers, fruit growers, vineyards, the whole gambit. People who make their livelihoods from these rich soils we have here. This committee sits at the heart of our most complex issues and wicked problems that we face. Climate resilience, freshwater health, biodiversity, land use, economic prosperity, and of course the long tail of weather events. Not only is land management a strategic priority, it also represents a significant financial investment and a resourcing commitment. So it's vital that we understand our why. I want to acknowledge the people and places that anchor this work, those very farmers and growers. Our staff here at Regional Council, our mana whenua, our communities, our volunteers, the thousands of foot soldiers who roll up their sleeves and do this mahi. Your work is noticed and appreciated. To our councillors, the decision makers at the table. While we don't have big decisions to make today, these are the foundations and the building blocks for making those good decisions ahead. Our job today is to connect our thinking across this complex architecture that is the Regional Council work, what we do and what we plan to do. It is vital that we remain grounded in evidence, hence the connection to a State of the Environment report, shape this with our community voices and guided by our really long-term thinking. We're here to be curious, join in, ask good questions, listen openly, and keep our focus on really good outcomes for our community. So, to set the tone for the day and bookend this fantastic journey we're about to commence, we're going to begin with an inspirational kōrero with Sam Gibson. Sam, the trap man, I can see Sam online. Kia ora, Sam. Sam reminds us, every patch of land we restore, every pest we remove, every choice we make to protect the whenua, it all adds up. Small actions done together create big change. That's a direct quote from you, Sam. Sam sits in this uniquely sweet spot where councils, communities, catchment groups, farmers and growers, nature, biodiversity, biosecurity, they all converge and meet together. So I'm really looking forward to your insights this morning. Sam, you are an inspiration. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. And I'll hand over to Richard to kick us off.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, nau mai hari.
Yeah, chair.
Nau mai hari mai, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Richard Wakeland toko whenua. Look, the way that we'll work this morning is that we're going to play the first 5 minutes and 6 seconds of Think Like a Forest. The full video, which is nearing 20 minutes, will be circulated to councillors with a link so that you can actually go in and watch the entire link. But we're just going to have a bit of a taste to start with for 5 minutes and then open it up for some questions to Sam. So join me in watching this.
For me, climate change is only too real. I come from Gisborne. We have been absolutely clobbered by severe weather events over the last couple of years. Cyclone Gabriel was really devastating for the East Coast community. We had rivers come through our homes. It shut down a lot of our farming operations, which had a huge economic impact on our people. Extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, but the devastating impact of flooding and erosion in our whenua, it's nothing new. When our original native forests in Tairāwhiti were cleared and converted to pasture, the steep hillsides gave way in heavy rain. It was an absolute disaster. Pines were planted with the hope of stabilising the land and supporting our local economy. But as we found with Cyclone Gabriel, those same pine plantations were far less resilient than our native forests. The problem was that those pine trees were a monoculture and they had single root systems that were all the same depth. So when you got saturation of water, whole swathes of forest fell into our rivers. the pine slash that got washed off the hill was hurled along the rivers like missiles, really, clearing out the forests and the vegetation along those riverbanks and folding them into the rivers and sending them out into the seas and onto our beaches. That was confronting, but the thing that was most confronting, I guess, was that we, in this day and age, are making decisions that will impact the next generation and the generation after that. It really hit home that we need to be conscious about building a future that is sustainable and that is solid for our landscapes. If we don't figure out a market driver, financial mechanisms to get diverse native forests back on our hills, our region and our people are in real trouble. Recloaking Papatūānuku is a long-term vision, but there's no time to waste. It'll take all of us working together. To bring back resilience to our landscapes, we need to think like a forest.
Rewa and I love eating people in the bush, and this fern here, moku, is one of our favourites.
I'm Sam the Trap Man. I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher, I'm a trapper. I just love getting out amongst it. The bush looks after us, so I reckon it's my job to look after the bush too. I'm not alone. All over Aotearoa, people are already working to recloak Papatūānuku. I'm going to meet some of them and hear about their work. We're going to explore how we can restore, regenerate and protect diverse native forests at scale and why this is so important and urgent right now.
Forests are amazing. They provide habitat for so many native species and they keep our water clean, they keep our hills together, they give us oxygen, that's useful. They provide food for us, it's just endless.
We've got weeds and we've got pest species that are throwing our ngahere out of balance. It's actually our responsibility as the ones who have brought those species in to return that balance. So it's quite obvious that we've got a role to play in the forest ecosystem.
These trees have been here a lot longer than farming's been in this environment. It's about using those natural assets to actually have a mosaic within the landscape of highly productive areas of the farm whilst protecting a whole lot of really important biodiversity.
When we're talking about recloaking Papatūānuku, we're talking about weaving. You know, we need to make sure the productive land stays productive, and it's about weaving farming and horticulture, making sure that we've got proper cloak on the erodible slopes and around the waterways. And I think we need that all across the country.
What a powerful way.
Graham Atkins.
Yep.
Thank you. That's the taster to encourage you to watch the full video that'll come to you in a link. And it's an opportunity now. Sam is very tight for time. As you can imagine, he's a person in high demand. And so we've got him for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes to ask some questions and I guess connecting it to Chair Roadley's kōrero, opening kōrero in terms of how we actually link these stories together. So thank you.
Shall we hand over to Sam, because we haven't let you speak yet? Let's hear from you, Sam.
Well, kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me along today. Aside from her big talking about me, like she's a massive inspiration with the catchment group she's doing up in her neck of the woods. And I love the balance between the whole driver for this is we need to be economically viable for the future in these really isolated communities. Really, we need to have our economy thriving, and some of our thinking up here in Tairāwhiti is that to have our lower pastoral lands not flooded, to have our roading networks in place, we really have to invest in resilience, because we're seeing some big impacts. And I know that you guys have over the last few years as well. So I'm not sure how much of my background you guys want me to yarn about, but I'm happy as to take any questions around Think Like a Forest, and I really respect your work as councillors. I'm a councillor also, so I think that there's a lot of opportunity to cross-pollinate, to learn, and to work together across regions on some of our big issues over the next little while.
Well done. Thank you, Sam. So I'd like to open the floor. I've got loads of questions, but I'm a bit of a greedy hog when it comes to questions. So I'd like to open the floor, or I can kick off on our behalf.
Want me to?
Yeah, go, Jock.
Sam, in addition to the trust that you have, is your main ally in what you want to achieve the catchment groups, and or what other people are you dealing with?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Jock. I think catchment groups are a key tool to this, but they also rely on external, mostly central government funding in many cases, and that can be a very fickle beast to chase. So we are working with industry predominantly. Our strongest ally, contrary to the media, is actually the forestry companies. They're doing a lot of work in our steep country and our highly erodible country. We're working really closely with them to improve practice with my councillor hat on. So that's one of the key partners, I guess. Catchment groups, very much so. Doing things at scale. I think things need to be done in the right place and at scale. And catchment groups, we're working really strongly with, as you guys are, with some great examples down in the Hawke's Bay. But the other thing with Pure Advantage hat on, it's working at that policy space at central government, because if we don't have that right and we don't have the funding metrics right and the investment potentially from international partners is where that funding's likely to come from, it's difficult for local operators to have the resources they need or the mechanisms they need to make the right land use choices.
Absolutely. Anyway.
Kia ora, Sam. Ngā mihi nunui ki a koe mō tō mahi I roto I tā tātou taiao. I'm Councillor Ormsby, and my question is around the mahi that you do to build strong, lasting relationships with mana whenua, and you touched on the financial challenges that all groups have. And I guess mana whenua are in the same boat when it comes to financial challenges. So just talk to us about those relationships you've built, but also the funding mechanisms for mana whenua to be involved.
I think that's a big question we've got, hey, and I think mana whenua come with, in our whānau we've got shares in Māori trust blocks, and the interesting thing is you don't have the backing of the banks to be able to loan against that in many cases. So leading from the land up here in Tairāwhiti, which is a catchment collective, we've widened our scope to be able to invest in Māori trust blocks, multiple owned land. So I think that's one model. But I think the biggest thing for us is creating funding mechanisms for whānau Māori that suit whānau Māori. So many times we come from the funder, and the funder's like, this is what I've got the money, and this is what I need it to look like. It needs to look like this, and this. And oftentimes it doesn't fit our communities. And what we are real active in doing is working with our funders in figuring out the funding models that actually suit our communities, suit our people's aspirations for their whenua, and working at bridging that gap between the funder and the community to have realistic funding clauses and agreements, because we're sick of in Tairāwhiti bending over backwards to try and meet the funders' aspirations while trying to fit ours in as a secondary thing. So I think that's our relationship in making things work for whenua Māori. The carbon space, the voluntary carbon market, has been very fruitful, and we're seeing that through Trees That Count in giving us an income stream on whenua Māori. but realistically, all of these solutions have to be designed at grassroots level and then attach the funders to them, and that's what we're doing. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how we're choosing to operate in our region.
Kia ora, Sam, very helpful.
It's a really tricky space. Kia ora, Chair Sears.
Thanks, Chair, through you. Morning, Sam, it's Sophie here, lovely to see you.
Kia ora.
Sam walked farms with us when he was a very young fellow, and he was always looking for lunch. And I always think that you were driven into this space in the forest because I know how much you love food, and look where it's taken you. Amazing, just amazing. Sam, I'm quite interested in this perceived conflict between the kind of highly erodible land using poles to stabilise land, and then this kind of native recloaking, and that's often perceived as a conflict. And my picture's always been that where you have highly erodible land and you're right back down to sort of bare bones, those erosion poles kind of give you some stability, we get bacterial and fungal change, and then you can put the native back underneath. So I'm quite interested in your view on that, because I know establishing native or regenerating native in those really rough areas is hard. So I'm quite keen to hear how you're seeing that.
Yeah, awesome question. And far, you know how inspired I am by your whānau, hey. So yeah, absolutely. And I think the funding model of it's really interesting as well, because it costs a lot more to establish native from scratch than it does to put poles in and then transition through, right? And one of the biggest things is that someone's got to pay for this. So our sheep and beef folks up in Tairāwhiti here, they're going, hang on, if we need to transition into native on our 3B, then that's a big financial ask. And poplar poles have a real role to play in that sheep and beef space, I think. And I don't think we can get too wed to any species. What we saw during the cyclones, and I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys in Hawke's Bay, I'm just going to talk about where we're from, is that pastoral land did not very flash as far as slippage goes. And then forestry did a little bit better, and then native did a whole lot better than that. And I think it's the same with the poplars, right? If we can get poplars on the ground, as you say, we stabilize that landscape and we can transition through into if it's fenced off, we can start to bring through those colonial species of natives underneath the poplars because the soil's not sort of slipping away on them, and then we can build a diverse system off of that. I think poplars are really great tool in the toolbox, and I think it's one that council can do a lot of work on, and have been really great at supporting our communities with. In a conservation setting, I'm often encouraging our catchment groups to plant fruit trees to start with, because our native forest trees like our tōtara, our kahikatea, our miro take so long to fruit that if we plant our apples, etc., to start with, our birds have a lot of food to eat, and then we can transition into our large native species as they reach maturity. And I think there is a real interim role for introduced species in that process, and poplars are a great one.
Lovely, thank you.
Iho, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'd like to hand back to you with your final comments. And could you think about what's the one thing that you would like us as councillors to do and to think as a result of this conversation and hearing your story?
One thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is we have reports come to the table at council, and we're challenged to prioritise spending, and we're challenged to prioritise key issues. And a lot of our thinking, just because the way the system's designed at council, is we get these papers to make decisions on, and they're often the ambulance at the bottom of the hill. And even with our 30-year infrastructure plans, we're thinking about the infrastructure. We're not thinking about the resilience that supports that infrastructure. And so to me, a big thing I'd like our councils across Aotearoa to be thinking about is, if we want our roading to be lower cost, what do we need to do in our catchments to support that? If we want our flood mitigation and flood tools to be a lower cost, what do we have to build into our landscapes to reduce that cost? And I think that that's a big part, and I'm not seeing that thinking come through our papers just yet, or at least not in our case. It may be in your case. So it's one of those things is actually I would like to see more thinking around funding the upstream resources rather than just thinking about repairing our downstream infrastructure, if that makes sense, because we're just going to keep seeing more damage if we keep thinking that way.
Madam Chair, can I just make another comment in relation to that?
As long as it's very quick.
G'day, Sam. I'm totally with you what you just said, and I'm just warning you now, and I'm feeling it myself because that's what I've always said. There's no point building higher stock banks on the plains if you don't do what is right in the catchment. Okay, so I'm totally with you, but I'm just warning you now. I'm already getting engineers telling in indirect ways to tell me to shut up. That's not how it's going to work. So you and I are aligned with this, and we should fight this back chat that we were getting from our engineers. Thank you.
It's lucky our constituents have asked us to not shut up and to have a voice at this table, hey?
Good.
Kia ora, and I don't think they stand a chance against you, Edith, and certainly not against you either, Sam. So, no, thank you so much for being with us here today. We do have a recommendation on the table, which is that the Environment Committee receives and notes the Think Like a Forest presentation from Sam Hamiora Gibson. All those in favour?
Aye.
I need a mover and seconder. Oh, sorry, mover and seconder. Thank you. Yes. Tony and Councillor Waitoa. All those in favour?
Right.
Aye.
Thank you. Apologies.
Excuse me, Chair, and I'm happy to move also that we receive the public forum report.
I was going to say I had one job to do at the start and I didn't do it. So my apologies. We did have a recommendation to receive the public forum speakers. So thank you. First from Chair Sears and second from Councillor Waitoa, please. And can we vote all in favour?
Yes.
Aye.
Sorry, tidying up those pieces. Thank you, Sam. Go well, my friend. We look forward to seeing you out in the...
Appreciate you, Koto. Have a great rest of your meeting. Ka kite.
Kia ora, bye, Sam.
Thank you.
I think she missed that.
It's not like you to miss that. No, having a shocker. But moving right along, thank you.
Exactly.
How fabulous to have our chambers full of guests, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome up to the front the members from the Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust. So we're all gentlemen. Would you like to come up to these seats up here? And Richard has this Richard. It's a fair gaggle of Richards here this morning. And we'll get you to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about what your area of specialty is, what's your interest, and what's brought you as volunteers onto the Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust. Could we start with, look, we've got a booking of Richards. I love it. I love that orderly piece. Should we start with you, Richard? Would you like to start?
Sure.
Introduce yourself.
Kia ora koutou, and thanks, Di, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm relatively new to the Future Farming Trust. I joined the trust midway through last year. So Willie and others, and Andrew will have a lot more to offer than me. However, why did I join? Essentially, horticulture has always been my passion, primary production, food production, and I've witnessed how we can do it poorly for most of my life. Poorly in the sense of environmental outcomes, possibly good in terms of productivity. And yeah, I guess I'm at a point where I genuinely believe there's a much better way of doing things in terms of our land management and our food production systems. And I'm really excited about that opportunity. And so, yeah, that's really the driver for me. We grow kiwi fruit. We've got a small family orchard. I'm chair of the Horticulture Advisory Group in Hawke's Bay, and I've been heavily involved in the Fruit Growers Association for around 10 years. I stepped down from that last year. So I guess my biggest involvement at the moment is the Carbon Positive project, which Dan Bloomer's going to talk to you about shortly. I think that's very exciting. It's about halfway through, but we're already starting to see some genuine outputs and learnings from that. I'll end it there and hand it to you.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, I'm Willie White from Ashley Clinton down in Central Hawke's Bay. I am involved with a reasonable scale of organic dairy farming, having converted our sort of home operations. Starting sort of 6 years ago when we made the changes there, and then that's now expanded into Partoka, into Northern Hawke's Bay. So sort of come 1st of June, between the two we'll be farming about 1,600 cows organically. I was asked to join the trust. I can't remember, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And despite not having really the time to do it, I've got a young family and a reasonable business to look after. I just felt that I had something to offer and did feel strongly about the goals of the trust. For me, the big thing was dispelling some of the myths around the way that we've decided to change our business, and it's largely the financial side of things. I came from a rural banking background prior to going back home farming, and the perception I see is that you've kind of got to it's sort of ideologically driven, and you've kind of got to sacrifice financially in order to do the right thing by your soils and across the board really. But this, as we've sort of been able to prove that is a myth. We've doubled our earnings, with a far lesser input, footprint. That's, I guess, the big message that I like to put out there. And I think it was Barry Riddler that, I can't remember the exact comment, but if you look after the economics, then the environment is taken care of. And I strongly believe that now, particularly in a pastoral farming sense that I'm involved with. So as far as, the trust goes, I think what you've got with this trust, obviously it's got a connection with Hawke's Bay Regional Council in terms of its initial setup. You've got a bunch of volunteers that don't necessarily probably have the time to give to it, but do it because they care. But it's despite being voluntary, it's a professional governance structure. And between all of us, there's a real deep connection into all of the sectors and all of our rural communities, and it's a resource that I believe, it'd be a tragedy not to utilise. I'll pass on to Andrew.
Good morning, Andrew Russell. I was here last week. I'm a sheep and beef farmer at Sheridan. I also co-chair of B2R catchment group. I co-chair that with Renata Hakawai. We're a co-governed catchment group, which I think is the only one in New Zealand. Yes, I have to say that most of my thunder's been stolen by Sam Gibson and my previous speakers. One of the frustrations I see as I drive past it every day on the way home at the moment is old thinking, just called a stop bank, being built beside the Taiapi Road. And we fought hard to try and get some modern thinking in there to no avail, which is very frustrating. So as far as where do I see the trust sitting in this whole thing, we've got links into catchment groups, and I think we've got to demonstrate there are some quick wins we can have to make a real difference to water and sediment runoff, and I think we need to champion that. We've already done that with some field days we've had, but we need to keep talking to the regional council or whoever you become after being regional council, because without that connection, I think we're all doomed. That's about me, Richard.
Good morning. Please excuse my scripted notes. They're done in a drive for conciseness. I'm Richard Lee. I'm a recently appointed new trustee, and I self-represent, it's a self-appointed title, pastoral landowners, farmers, community of Hawke's Bay, with a particular emphasis on sheep, beef, deer, renewable energy, basically the red meat industry, which must not be forgotten in this forum. I'm a partially retired production animal vet, and I bring to the Trust a working lifetime in Hawke's Bay of awareness of the sector, connections, networks, and a deep sense of commitment to it. I'm a sheep and beef farmer, and I'm a sheep and beef farmer's son. I'm a father to a sheep and beef farmer. I consider that relevant. I'm a trained rural facilitator within the sector, and I have a passion for and a track record in sourcing independent, science-based assimilation and dissemination of information to drive change. And change has many faces: technical, challenging, uncomfortable, expensive, new. And on an individual and human level, it requires trust in the brokers of this change to instill the confidence to adapt and adopt. The Hawke's Bay Farming Future Trust and its trustees have the setup, background and skills. They have independence, connections and reputation to play a key role in the facilitation of change. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was great. We do have a few slides to go through. Richard, we might just go through, you've got the driver there, haven't you? We might go through them reasonably quickly so that we can turn to questions from councillors. You guys can see that, eh? Do you want to talk to these or?
Yeah, well, unless you want to die.
It's a little weird dynamic because I am the chair of this group, but no, I'm keen for you to talk about. Perhaps Richard, could we flick through to the next one? So the Trust is in a phase of an emerging strategy, and these are our 4 key pillars that we're moving towards. We've got about 3 minutes. Would you like to each take one and just expand on it, Richard?
I'll start. Can I start? I'll jump in because I want to go first.
Great.
I'm in pillar number 4, showcasing profitable farming businesses. On a personal basis, I was on a property last week that is an entrant to the Hawke's Bay Farm of the Year competition. That is an absolute exemplar of everything that's been talked around this table in terms of environmental guardianship, future-proofing, care for the community, all underpinned by a very, very successful, profitable, resilient pastoral farming system, okay? We have those exemplars. Let us show them to you guys and the community.
I'm going to take the next one.
You go on.
Encouraging long-term sustainable thinking to champion future-focused farming practices in a changing climate. Carbon positive's a classic example of that, but we are exploring options around regenerative farming. At home, apparently we are regenerative. That's what the Savoury Institute tell us, but I keep saying that we just do what we do and because we do what we think is right. And I'll back up what Willie said, and the more we've gone down this track, the more profitable we're getting and more sustainable and more resilient. And just a little aside to that, we had a strategy meeting which my 22-year-old son was involved with, and the strategies facilitator asked us what was our horizon, and my business partner, Kieran, who's 38, he and I thought, oh, we'll stretch it out, we'll go to 10 or 15 years. my 22-year-old son said, I'm thinking more of 99. So I think the young people are actually probably ahead of us in thinking about the future.
I'll go back, I think probably I might be more suited to the first one. So promotion of farming and growing practices to build resilient use of soil, water and climate-ready farming. Yeah, this is a big one for me, and you know, I can only talk to sort of some of my experiences here, but again, and the word resilient gets used a lot, but it is the right word for what we're trying to achieve, and it's, you know, we went through Gabriel, you know, like everyone here, and yep, while we had some damage around the place and a bit of fixing up to do that's still probably going on, it had no noticeable impact on our financial year from the year before. So I don't know, that to me is resilience. And yeah, we didn't have you know, a lot of soil damage and stuff like that. So and that was also during a time where there was a lot of inflation happening around the world. And so, you know, conventional farming businesses were being stung with a dropping commodity price and a rising cost base. Well, our cost base has really been stable since 2022 and continues to be. So while everyone now is nervous about, you know, what's the impact of the price of fertiliser in particular and all the rest of it, which will flow through to imported feeds and everything down the track, we don't have that exposure. So I feel a lot more comfortable being able to handle the things that are out of control, have less impact on our business now. And I think that's the most important. That was the one thing we wanted to be able to prove, and I think we did prove that particularly through that tricky period through 23-4.
I'll be very quick. At the risk of being boring, further to both Andrew's and Willie's point, we converted our home orchard to organic management about 5 years ago, and last year we had our highest ever orchard gate return. So again, I think it's so important that we can provide evidence that doing things you know, with a better environmental outcome can also be more profitable, not just, you know, sustainable. And the fourth and final slide there references local science. So I think Dan and Olivia will talk to that. But I think it's the Trust obviously has a unique position in being wholly independent. We don't have any bias or constraints, and so we can really address the really important questions. But I'll let Dan and Olivia talk more to that.
Thanks, Richard. Can you speak on? We are running up against time pressures, whānau, but the sweet spot that this trust sits in is very focused on commercial productive land use, with science, with evidence, and local science and evidence, and interpreting that and showcasing good people doing really good things. We've probably got time for one very quick question if anybody's got a burning
I have something
question.
terribly important, Guy.
Please go ahead, Councillor.
Hey, Willie, I remember your presentation to us last time, you know, a couple of years ago, I think it was, and I also remember as part of that presentation, in addition to dairy, we talked quite a bit about soils and over-tilling of soils and all that sort of stuff. And the frustrating thing is that if I'm a dairy cocky and I hear what you have to say and I'm doing it conventionally, I'm thinking, I'm into your bit like a robber's dog, man. It's going to make me more money and easier to do probably too. So why aren't people jumping into that? And the reason, some will be suspicious, some will be they kind of just don't know about it. And it feels like you're doing a lot of fantastic volunteer work, but it kind of feels like you need someone to get out there and get around the cockies and say, look guys, here's a much better way, and you'll end up making more money and dealing to the environment as well. So it's sort of a, you know, in a nutshell, it's a comms thing, it seems to me.
Yeah, apologies, I'm as ill prepared for this meeting as I was the last one, probably.
You had 2 years, come on, Billy.
But yeah, it's a good point, and it's often made. I think you've got to remember as well that there's a huge amount of resistance, not necessarily from farmers, but by people, by industry that has a lot of influence on farmers. Huge amount of resistance to it for obvious reasons.
And it's obvious that's why the trust factor is so important, that this group are experts in this field, or in lots of different fields, lots of different types of land use. They are independent, so they have got no selling of any souls to anywhere, and they sit outside electoral cycles. So it doesn't matter what's happening at the Crown, at what's happening in here. Well, it does matter, obviously, but they're not having to suddenly change tact or change the flavour. It's very much focused on what the science is telling us, and then being the trusted advisors to, or trusted friends to share that, peers out to them. Chair says has a burning question.
Burning.
It's burning. It needs to be
make
very
it short.
quick.
It's not short, but it's really important, and one of you can choose to answer it. We know what happens at ground level. I'm an organic farmer too, so we all understand that around this table. We all know what Willie's talking about if we're in that world around cost, around international pressures. We all know about the returns we get. We all know that we are not getting the type of traction that we would expect given putting those factors together. Like Jock says, you'd think everybody would be into that. I'm interested to know from you guys what we saw in Ireland when they developed their strategy around Ireland Green or whatever it was. They specifically said at a government level, we know that high quality clean food is a primary driver for increased income, and it's wanted around, well, particularly Europe. They set a strategy to grow their certified organic land production to 10% of all agriculture in Ireland, and they got there, I think, within 3 years or 6 years instead of 10, whatever the strategy was. I think one of our missing links is there's no drive at a central government level to promote what we're talking about here, which I think is the missing link, and I'd like to know if you agree with that or have different views or are having conversations at government level around what I see as the missing link there. Sorry, not sure.
I've got a probably highly offensive view, but no, I mean, I get that, but I also think that there's a very good reason, and it's a fundamental reason why New Zealand farmers, by and large, at the moment are in the best spot in the whole world. Go and find happy farming communities in any other country in the world at the moment. It's actually quite hard, whereas you've actually got pretty well profitability across the board now in New Zealand, and I do believe that is because we actually have to stand on our own 2 feet. We're not beholden to government. Because we've been unsubsidised since the 80s, and I appreciate the work that went in largely by the generation before to go through the pain that we had to go through, but that position we're in now is very strong, and it means that we should be able to continue to look at our solutions, from within as well. Because sometimes government can, with the best intentions, can not quite execute the way they would like it.
And they're bound by electoral cycles and they change.
Exactly.
Can I just make a comment around which dovetails into Jock's question? I think one of the tools this trust is starting to use more and more is catchment groups. Because if you want to connect with farmers, it's all very well wheeling in some shiny person from the regional council or wherever the hell it is. They'll just look at them and go, yeah, I've heard all that before. But if it's someone from your local community who's actually doing it, they go, well, it works, there it is, it's happening, it's right there in front of me. And once more, if I have a crack at it and I'm a bit lost, I can give Andrew a ring and go, hang on a minute, how did you do that again? So I think that it's that local, from the ground up sort of approach, rather than government making some great big decree that you will do this. I think that's where you'll get real traction.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it, and that's why the work that you do is so important. I thank you for coming in this morning. I thank you for the work that you do and will do as we execute our new strategy. We have a recommendation on the table that the Environment Committee receives and notes soil as a strategic focus report. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I would like to move that.
Thank you. Seconder, Richard, over here. Got it. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, carried.
That's right. New middle name. Thank you, Rob. New middle name, Richard.
Thank you.
You're right.
There's just so many Richards around. Richard. Thank you, team. It's my pleasure to invite Dan and Olivia. Would you please come forward? While they're coming up, I'd like to direct you back to the State of the Environment report, which notes that soil carbon plays a critical role in both environmental health and sustainable agricultural production. The presence of soil carbon can aid in climate change mitigation and improve soil health by enhancing nutrient cycling, water retention and plant growth. Richard, would you like to introduce our guests, please?
Just setting up the...
Thank you. We are really pushing up against time, Dan. I apologise in advance for that. We're probably about 10, 15 minutes, if that's all right, so councillors have got a chance to ask you some questions. So if you could frame up your presentation with that in mind.
I need IT because our machines won't give us access to a... Have you got a laptop that you can plug in?
While we're waiting for IT, we will take the report as read. Obviously, there is the report in the agenda, but there's the further information that you will have viewed in Docs on Tap.
I'll just sit here.
Sorry about that.
Can you throw my glasses at me, please, Olivia, because I can't see anything. Thank you. Got to get rid of a whole lot of rubbish that was being worked on before.
Let me have a question this time.
You've got to quote me because I'm looking over here.
Okay.
Give me this, Richard. What's your name? What's your name?
Excuse me, through you, Chair, did you have an instruction for me? Did you?
Oh, did you want to just introduce Dan?
Yep. Kia ora. So, welcome Dan and Olivia to the Environment Committee meeting. So I guess just as a background, this is a project that HBRC does have a history in supporting, and this is an opportunity for Dan and Olivia to share with us update and where the current position is. So, yeah, I'd like to hand over to Dan.
Thanks, Richard.
Dan, forgive me if I give you the old about 10 minutes in.
Yeah. Kia ora tātou, ko Dan Bloom marahu. Just very quickly, Landwise evolved out of Regional Council when I worked here years ago. And we set out to stop wind erosion and fix irrigation, and I asked what they wanted done after lunch. But then Landwise actually got a bit big for council, and they asked me to set it up as an independent society so I could handle government money, which we did. So it was incorporated in 2003. We've done 24 conferences and major projects, and we run our microfarm. So that's just a background to where we came from and who we are. Carbon Positive is one of the previous governments set up a whole lot of regenerative farming projects. And we were the one that was looking at the cropping side of things, most of them are pastoral. So we partner with Waddies and McCain's in particular. We were funded by the Regional Council for 6 years, but you pulled your funding a couple of years ago and left me with a big bloody headache, and I'm not happy about that. I'm going to get Olivia to run through a very summary of the project, and then we'll come back to some of the findings to date. So I'm the old one, Olivia's the next generation, so listen to her.
Yeah, perfect. So the Carbon Positive trial is a 6-year trial that we're running on the Landwise micro farm, and we're trying to determine if soil health and quality can be improved by sequestering carbon through sustainable and regenerative practices while maintaining or increasing crop profitability. The trial layout, we have 3 different treatments. So the conventional is what the typical grower is doing on the Hiratonga Plains. And then the regen follows the McCain's regen principles that they have. And the hybrid is somewhere in the middle and is seen as a transitional phase. So these are the 6 McCain's regen principles that we're trying to fit into a processed cropping system, which has been a bit of a challenge to date. We don't make any decisions within the trial itself. We have an operations advisory group that does this, so that's made up of the processors, McCain's and Heinz Waddies, the agronomists, a local regen advisor, local growers, and anyone else who's keen to come along and have a look at what we're doing. We have been doing a suite of soil health measurements as well as monitoring all our inputs that we are doing for each crop, and then measuring the crop yield and then ultimately getting gross margins from that. So this year we've grown butternuts for Heinz Waddies. So they were all in cover crop over the winter, grazed by sheep. And then the main difference between the hybrid and regen, the conventional, is that the hybrid and regen was strip tilled, whereas the conventional was normal cultivation. And then by doing this, we actually managed to suppress the weeds by strip tilling, whereas the conventional treatment had a weed strike after planting, so we had to spray out again before the butternuts germinated themselves. And the main difference as well between our treatments has been our nitrogen inputs. So this year, for the regen butternuts, they only got 18 kilos of nitrogen compared to 77 in the conventional and 67 in the hybrid. And these are our soil nitrate test results, and you can see there isn't a very big difference between the treatments at all, only after side dressing, where the regen treatment got no granular fertiliser, we saw a significant difference between the nitrate levels. But the regen treatment still had a sufficient amount of nitrogen for the crop. And we've actually just done our hand harvest this week on Monday, and there's no significant difference between our 3 treatments. And we got about 50 tonnes of butternuts per hectare, so we're quite pleased with that result. And
that's double what you expect. So the nitrogen on a small crop must be a little bit excessive these days, I think.
Yes. So we use the Environmental Impact Quotient, or EIQ, which is an online tool through Cornell University. So we use this to compare the different agrochemicals at a field use level. So it's looking at the active ingredient and how much of that you're using and the toxicity of that active ingredient. So when we're deciding what agrochemicals to use in the regen or hybrid treatments, we can rank them and choose the ones that have the least impact on the environment. So this year with our butternuts, actually we haven't changed from the conventional program because they all had a low EIQ score, so around 10, compared to one application of glyphosate, which is about 60. So all of our fungicides and bactericides were reasonably low.
So do we go now? We did soil carbon stocks before we started the project, down to 90 centimetres, and then we repeated those in October last year, so 3 years in, and we'll do them again at the end. And what it's shown is that there's actually not really any difference. So the raw number says it's gone up a little bit, but statistically, when you look at it, you wouldn't say it was a significant difference. So that's the total amount of carbon in the soil. This is labile carbon. So labile carbon is the really fast turnover stuff. And I tend to say, think of it as worm goo, root exudates, and the rapid breakdown of organic material, and it changes a lot and it changes fast. And what you can see in this chart, apologies for 2 charts or 3 in one presentation, but there's no real difference between our treatments. The differences are to do with the crop successions that we use and the seasons more than regen versus conventional, if you like. So we're trying to understand, how is this going on? So we've done a whole lot of modelling. And here's another chart. And this just says, of the total photosynthesis that we could capture from the sun, how much has gone into leaves and fruit? That's the green bit. How much has gone into roots? That's the brown bit. And how much has been oozed into the soil, which is actually a really critical carbon that ends up contributing to total carbon stocks long term, like thousands of years. And they're not hugely different overall, but you'll see with certain crops they are and certain things because we had different cover crops. And then we said to it, so how much carbon sequestration did we lose in the system? How much could we have had if, for example, we just left it in ryegrass for the whole time? Because we keep cultivating and starting again from scratch or having fallow periods. And so we're not getting any sunshine into the ground. Our solar factories are shut. And when we do that, this is another horrible picture, but the dark red bits are all the lost potential that we had because of the way you have to grow crops. You have to kill one to harvest it, and it takes a while for the next one to get going, okay? But you'll see in our regen one, we actually had a great big fallow period, and that cost us a lot. The other problem we've had with regen is our group didn't really want to use any glyphosate, and so we end up cultivating a lot more than we should. And now they've changed their mind and decided that maybe a little bit of glyphosate's no worse than a whole lot of cultivating, and we will see what happens over the next 3 years. So summary, the conventional is reliable, predictable, we know it works. You put a lot of inputs, you get a lot of outputs, and it makes money. Regen, we've used 76% less fertiliser overall, and we don't think we've limited yields. The first year we lost money on sweet corn through probably low nitrogen, but it was also Cyclone Gabrielle that sat 1/2 metre of water on our crop for a while, which kind of had some impact too. So what do you make of it? The first year, the system hasn't changed at all, so maybe it's not functioning. Last year, the regen beans out-yielded the other ones. This year, there's no difference between any of them for the butternuts. So we think the nitrogen is a really big place to look. Olivia's looked at the greenhouse gas emissions. Our biggest emitter is nitrogen fertiliser by miles, both through use of it in the paddock and manufacture and transport. The second one, which is half of that, is diesel. The other ones are kind of also RANs. So we're trying to minimise our tillage, minimise our nitrogen, and that will help our greenhouse gas emissions, but we think it will also start to impact on our soil biology and our soil health. So that's pretty much that. We can do that. Just a couple of other things we've done as part of what is we studied a new test for soil aggregate stability, and we did some work with Te Ahi Kaweriki in Pukekoi. This is a test a farmer can do with a bit of digging, a microwave and a cell phone to look at how well their soil is holding together under stress. Saves you $250 a test. We've been using a nitrogen device. So we use quick test nitrogen strips, same as you use for dipping into your swimming pool to see if it's right. But this reader lets us, with appropriate calibrations, get the same as lab data. So for several dollars a bit of time, we save $40 to $70 on a test for that. So we do 24 tests every 2 weeks, and we quite like saving a bit of money on lab fees. And we've also done some other work on cover crops around New Zealand just to understand how they fit. So I'll leave it there, but that's pretty much, in a nutshell, about this much of a big project.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Olivia. Tony, I know you're busting.
Oh, well, I've gone along to the odd field day over a year or two, Dan. I'm just wondering, what timeframes do you think we need to see any differences in soil health and carbon?
Yeah, the total carbon stocks, it's going to take you 6-7 years before you're going to reliably see something statistically different. The labile carbon will show up quicker, and we're starting to get a hint that there might be something there, and you're not allowed to say that statistically because it either is or it isn't, but every now and then we start thinking, oh, hang on, something's happening, and that is a much faster churn. You can see through that chart, which was sort of 6 monthly intervals, it's up and down all over the place, and we think that will start to show up the changes quicker. It's actually starting to show a little bit of change now, but we don't have confidence that it's real change yet. We need longer time. I think in another 3 years at the end of the project, which is actually another 2.5 years, we'll probably have a pretty good idea. But one of the things I think this project's showing us is that maybe conventional, which we give rubbish to, we give it a hard time, maybe it's not that bad anyway. And the hybrid system is very much the system that Hugh Ritchie and Simon White use in Otani. So they're using strip till, no till. They've got 5-year rotations with pasture and this and the thing. And their soils are really nice. If you go and dig them up, they're actually much nicer than other soils of the similar type where people don't do that. So I think there are quite regenerative practices in parts of Hawke's Bay already. just on the Hiratonga Plains, if you're trying to do processed crop after processed crop after processed crop, it's really hard to manage that. The land's just too expensive to leave it for a while. That's the perception anyway.
Thank you. Fantastic to see real science in the land right here and actually having impacts across our commercial growers and across our food system. So thank you for the work that you are doing.
Well done.
Oh, am I allowed another?
It's got to be short.
I don't want to open a can of worms, but how do you think the council should be connected to this project?
Well, to be blunt, coughing up the money you promised and then didn't give us would help, because if you take $30,000 out of our budget, the government then reduces that by twice as much, because we have to balance their funding by your funding. So we stand to lose 100 grand. So at the moment, I'm personally paying that money instead. And I'm not as rich as the council, so I reckon you should pay what you said you would pay.
An important point. Could you remind us when you have your walkthroughs, because you're all invited, as is the wider community, to go along to the farm. When do you have them? Just remind us.
We have an operations one most Thursdays at 2 o'clock, and that's the advisory group, so come along for a yarn. But then roughly once a month we notify it through our newsletters to say we'll have a public one. We'll also, 27th, 28th of May, we've got our Landwise conference in Havelock North, and we'll be presenting this plus a whole lot of other relevant stuff at that.
Fantastic. So get amongst it, councillors and general public. It's a great piece of work being done right here and having, well, potential to have big impacts across the way we manage our highly productive soils. We have a recommendation that the Environment Committee receives and notes the Soil Carbon Positive Research Project Report. Could I have a mover and a seconder,
Could I ask
please?
a quick question before we do that?
Is it a question or a comment?
A quick question.
Yep.
Because you just mentioned about the funding that you lost. How much funding did you lose and why?
$30,000 a year because you stopped paying.
Because
you stopped
well,
paying.
I realise that, yeah. Why did we stop paying?
It's a question for councillors.
Okay.
And one that you'll be asking yourself very shortly as we go into annual plan and long-term plan.
Cool, thank you.
So the recommendation is on the table. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move.
Thank you. Seconder and seconder, Councillor Sears. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Thank you, carried. Ka kite, thank you for coming in. We look forward to keeping close connection with you both through the Hawke's Bay Future Farming Trust and through your visits.
Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies for putting a time pressure on you. We move over to our introduction to soil conservation evaluation methods. We've got Ashton and Warwick, and just Ashton and Warwick. We will take the presentation as read. There was a lot of information within the paper, so thank you for that, and looking forward to the presentation.
Through you, Chair, would you like me just to frame up the...
Before you do, Richard, I've got this little habit I've got going. I'm flapping around this, and it's the pages I've printed out of the State of the Environment report, and I just wanted to note that within the report, which is our science of what is actually happening across Te Mata a Maui, hill country erosion is a key issue in Hawke's Bay. 18% of our eroding land experiences over 1,000 tonnes of erosion per square kilometre each year. It is estimated that this land delivers 8.5 megatonnes of sediment into the stream and river network and 8 megatonnes of sediment into our coast every year. So that's what the science is telling us. And these guys are at the forefront of trying to mitigate that.
Kia ora. So, thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair. This paper is brought to you in support of the proposed changes around introducing next-gen land management, and for us to start thinking about how we measure the effectiveness of our soil conservation interventions and our methods. And part of this is connecting to the stories you've heard this morning, in particular Sam Gibson talking about the various interventions and the effects that it actually has on soil erosion and sedimentation. As you're aware, sediment is the master stressor for Hawke's Bay. It is our most significant issue that we have to deal with from an environmental perspective, and so therefore it commands a high degree of attention for us. The challenges that we've had, and particularly in recent years, is understanding the measurement methodology. How do we understand that the investment that our community is making in soil conservation, is it effective and is it contributing to an improvement? And traditionally we've used areas treated and production orientated figures, and now we're looking to focus more on how we can understand different measurement methodologies, and the team here today is to take you through that journey and to land on what we believe is an effective way to measure the effectiveness of our soil conservation interventions. So it's my pleasure. We have our science team and our land management team represented today. So we have Hayley Atera as our science manager, and Dr. Ash Neves as our land scientist. We have Paula Richardson as our manager of land management, and Warwick Hesketh as our principal advisor land management to take you through today. And I guess what I'd like to, the sense that I'm looking to set is understanding that this is part of the bigger story. So in order for us to think about our interventions, we need good measurement devices. So we need to actually understand how effective our interventions are being. Thank you. I'll hand over to Warwick to kick us off.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Warwick Hesketh Pakuengoa, he land management taku tūranga mahi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to our paper today, Introduction to Soil Conservation Evaluation Methods. I'm very much just the warm-up act today. I'll start with a bit of background on how we use models and how we collect data to help show the effectiveness of our work. Then I'll pass you over to Dr. Ash to get into some of the more technical details. After all, our scientists are the real rock stars of this organisation. I do want to start off by saying that this isn't going to be a talk about how planting trees is good for reducing erosion, and I think we've moved beyond that. Our soil conservation techniques and principles are grounded in science and backed up by years of research, but I did find out that the earliest written records of the relationship between tree cover and the impacts of erosion was actually in ancient Chinese and Roman texts around 2nd and 3rd century BC. So I've been around almost that long. This is actually a painting of me at my first catchment group meeting.
Well, you haven't improved.
I had a bit more hair back then, and the halo has long gone. I'm also not going to dwell on the fact that soil conservation has both a public and a private benefit. For the landowners, that's about business resilience. For the public, it's about those water quality outcomes and managing the impacts of erosion downstream. We've talked about how a dollar invested in risk reduction could be worth at least $4 in avoided recovery cost. In fact, I think we've become pretty good at quantifying the impact and the cost of events like Cyclone Gabrielle, but it's not as easy to say what didn't happen and what that didn't cost. So we know that it works, and we know that it has value, but we still have an obligation to firstly show that where we're working, we're targeting our efforts to where the work's most required, and secondly, that what we're doing is going to be effective. And that's just as important to the landowners that we're working with, as well as our funding partners. So models like SEDNet can help to guide us where we work. They are just a model though, so they're only as accurate as the data that underpins them. They can give us a highly generalised view of landscape risk from which we can start a farm planning process. But they're not going to tell us about where our critical source areas are. They're not going to tell us what to plant and at what spacings. And perhaps most importantly, these models, they're not going to take into account those wider social and environmental considerations. Aspects like cultural value, recreation, or impacts on sensitive receiving environments. The sorts of things that we do need to be thinking about if we're talking about targeting and prioritising work. So since 2018, we've become much better at collecting and reporting spatial information. That's enabled me to come to these meetings and be able to say that in the last 8 years, we've retired or planted over 6,000 hectares of highly erodible land, to which you might justifiably say, well, so what? What does that mean in terms of water quality or preventing the downstream effects of erosion? And you'd be right, by itself, this data can't tell you much. We can infer based on best practice and years of research that what we're doing is going to be effective. But we also know that our work doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's all sorts of other things going on, good and bad, that are going to have an impact on how a catchment behaves normally and during a weather event. And that includes soil conservation planting that might have happened prior to our more recent schemes, as well as land use change and planting that's happened independently. And conversely, deforestation that might be the result of a harvesting operation or loss of trees during a storm event. But our ability to capture land cover data has improved massively through remote sensing technology. The outputs that we get from LiDAR and multispectral satellite imagery, it helps to give our data context. It fills the gaps and it improves the accuracy and the reliability of the models that we use. It also makes a big hole in that 250,000 hectares of erosion land that we talk about. So soil conservation at a catchment scale, it is a long game. Even with something that grows as quickly as a poplar or a willow tree, it's going to be some 9 to 13 years before we do start to get some erosion control benefit from those trees. And even longer before that collective effort can start to make a measurable impact on our waterways. Ash can probably explain it a lot better than me, but to be able to get a statistically accurate water quality trend, we need consistent long-term monitoring without any gaps, and that's to iron out those spikes that we get from extreme weather or disturbance events. And this is where having a good model can actually help to show, or give us an idea of that effectiveness in the interim. So I'll now pass over to Ash, and he can go into a bit more detail around those options for measuring effectiveness.
Okay, thanks, Warwick. So, where are we headed? I'm going to cover this over in a few slides. It's a hybrid approach that we're going to look at how we can evaluate some methods. First, we're going to look at spatially explicit predictive modelling to guide outcomes, which Warwick's alluded to a little bit there. Empirical monitoring of reference catchments to measure success or measuring waterways. And finally, system dynamics models for testing economic futures. So I'm just going to briefly recap on some of the spatial modelling that we've had done over the recent years. Some of you probably heard Hugh Smith from Manaaki Whenua talk about some of this work. So we do have these models and we are applying them now, and these geomorphological models are really useful for soil conservation. Particularly what we've been using is the landslide susceptibility and connectivity models, because this allows us to target the erosion. The SEDNet one that Warwick referred to, that's more for targeting watersheds, so we'll know if a watershed has a particular yield. And as you mentioned, these are adaptive and improve with every time we get new information, say LiDAR or satellite imagery. So here I can step you through. On the left there, you've got the susceptibility probability in the susceptibility connectivity model, and then you have in the middle the connectivity probability. So first one is where in the landscape are the risks. The second are they connected to waterways? And third, we combine these models to get a classification. This makes it easier for us to go and target areas. So you can see on the right there, you've got 1 through 7 is the key. And generally speaking, 7 and 6, we can target hill slopes. 4s and 5s, probably, 4s and 7s will target the riparian areas, and probably 4, 5, 6, 7, you're targeting the lot. I'll quickly run through what the current state of our water quality monitoring program is. I'll start with the sediment monitoring program. So this is a dual purpose monitoring program. So it does look at both SOE monitoring as well as catchment investigations. We use here the ISCO auto samplers. We actually have one out the side, so on your break we can get that cranked up and you can have a look at that. We also use turbidity sensors for looking at continuous data. The success of these is dependent on the catchment size, the land use in the catchments, accessibility, and the long timeframes that was mentioned before. It's quite an intensive monitoring system, and it requires about 1 FTE per 10 sites where we don't have hydrology already set up. And these results will inform the soil conservation models. So we need, with these models, obviously, we need measurements to help them run. The sediment monitoring program is the only definitive way to capture the sediment load in catchments and see if we're getting a reduction there. However, we cannot measure everywhere. The broader science water quality monitoring program has 85 sites for freshwater. They measure visual clarity, turbidity, total suspended solids, and volatile suspended solids. Some of these sites predate 2011, having quarterly measurements. So now we're up to a monthly regime for those other measurements. The coastal team, they have sediment plates deployed to the estuaries, where they can discover the rates of deposition over time. We have 8 of these across 3 estuaries. These sites provide really useful background information, but it's very hard to isolate the land use change and the treatments given the size of the catchments and the locations of some of these sites. So moving on to the future state, what we're intending to look at is reference catchments. These will have an established history of soil conservation works or a clearly defined plan for future interventions. They'll be small enough to respond measurably and have suitable stream morphology and accessibility. In other words, targeted planting and targeted monitoring that delivers results through measurements. As you can see from the image, the Wairau sites are ideal for reporting the state of the environment at the management area unit, although it'll take decades for us to detect at that scale. Conversely, the small Waikatuku and Waimanu sites down on the bottom right of the slide there are useful sizes, therefore we can see changes quite quickly. Moving on to number 3, modelling economic futures using system dynamics. So this is a computer-aided approach to policy analysis and design. So we can deal with complex and dynamic problems arising from economic, social, managerial or ecological systems. It allows us to explore economic futures ahead of time by coupling environmental and economic models and to investigate costs and benefits. These models require group input so that the models do not interpret the world from the programmer's view. Therefore, they should incorporate scenario planning where we can set the scene by workshopping key system drivers and interactions. These models get really complex really quickly, so the aim is to focus on the influences that we can intervene in the system. Here on the left, you can see the causal loop diagram that we've used for this work, and on the right, stock flow diagram. In a causal loop diagram, there are reinforcing and balancing loops in the system in question. With a reinforcing loop, we tend to see the system going out of equilibrium, whereas in a balancing loop, we want to try and bring that system back to a dynamic equilibrium. And on the right, we have a stock flow where we take the initial causal loop diagram and turn that into a computational algorithm where we can look at the causes more directly with the interventions. So looking at the future scenarios I've mentioned before, we workshopped these 3 hypothetical scenarios with the land management team over about the last 6 months. We thought, well, 3 is a good number. You can have the baseline, so we've got the baseline there where we do nothing. What we'd say is there'll be no intervention from government after 2027 as the erosion control programs wind up. This is a short-term economic benefit, but as you'd imagine, a long-term economic cost. Council has an advisory role, but nothing else. We then have a look at a conventional scenario. So we'd look to be planting about 900 hectares of poplars and natives across the region per year. And we'll use 3 targeted catchments in the northern, the central and the southern areas to put our measuring stations against. And we'd also retire the very high-risk land into natives. So, for example, when we looked at the maps earlier, that would be, say, Zone 7s, for example. The gold standard, if we really wanted to target the 6 and 7 land that I mentioned earlier, we would need to be planting about 1,200 hectares a year across the whole region. So quite a higher rate, but not insurmountable. In this type of modelling, you always need a baseline to compare against because you want to work out what the counterfactual would be in any case. So I'm just going to delve into one of the outputs from the model, the soil loss cost. These are indicative results so far, and under the baseline scenario, the loss of soil, the cost of loss of the soil through to about 2050 is about $11.8 billion under the baseline. Under the conventional scenario, it's about $7.7 billion, and under the gold standard, it's about $7.5 billion. Therefore, the cost of doing nothing is around $4 billion when we compare the interventions against the baseline scenario. A couple of the assumptions into this particular output is that the treatment costs are around $150 million to $250 million by 2050 for those interventions. And this is based on a soil loss cost of $5 per tonne taken from Manaaki Whenua's report after the cyclone, as well as the silt recovery task force of about $16 a tonne for cleanup. So in conclusion, soil conservation works, but the proof takes time. There is no single silver bullet measurement tool. All have different costs and benefits. Hence, monitoring is about smarter investment, not just accountability. Therefore, we offer a pragmatic approach with the hybrid reference catchments to use as well as models so we can get a long-term outcome in the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, team. Councillors, with your permission, I would hate to chop us off for questions into this very important piece of work. Could I seek that we go over time about 10 minutes, which will have us finishing at about 10-15 minutes after 12. Is that okay with everybody? Mm-hmm. You will have my agreement to leave if you have pressing engagements. So with that said, questions. Henry.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Warwick and Ash. Super interesting, and I love the monitoring. We can't manage without the monitoring. But when I think about our future as a region, and you've talked about spatial planning, and so a lot of the data, the information, the evidence you've been able to collect over these many years and modelling going forward, how do you see that play out into a spatial plan and a policy setting? Because essentially empowerment comes from a stick or a carrot, and so policy development is really important, and having good evidence behind it. So can you talk to us about how you see that happening in spatial planning?
Want me to start that one?
Would you?
As far as soil erosion is concerned, if it's treated as a natural hazard, say for example as a landslide, then yes, it would go under the natural hazard part of the spatial plan. Highly erodible land, I don't know if it's going to be in the spatial planning yet. It would be really useful to see highly erodible land in the spatial plan. This here, the models that we've shown you, is for the shallow landslides, so it wouldn't incorporate all types of erosion. So yeah, I think there's a bit of work to do before we could actually put what our erodible land is into a spatial plan, because for the work that we've shown you, yeah, would only be giving you a fraction, which could then be contested, or it's too granular and would need to scale up and go, this particular face could be prone to landslides, for example, which I don't think, we would really want to be putting ourselves in that seat until we had better modelling done.
Okay, so we're part way, but we don't have all the data yet to
Yeah,
inform.
and there is work being done by Earth Science NZ on the landslides part. So risk from landslides. They will have new probability-based models out next year, start of next year. After what we've seen in the Upper North Island, they're rerunning their models with what happened at the mount and whatnot and trying to come out with better models for us. And we did have some of these layers, but yeah, they've been redacted. So we're a little bit behind, but I think in a year or two we'll be right there with spatial planning.
Thank you.
Councillor Waitoa.
Kia ora, Chair. May I have two?
Can we give you one and then come back to
Nice
you?
and short.
Well, let's see.
Thank you. Just the report, just if we look at the report on page 11.8, the report notes that every dollar spent on soil conservation, at least $4 is saved in recovery costs. Just for me, could you just clarify whether that 4.1 figure is a general literature-based estimate or whether it's Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Hawke's Bay Pacific evidence or analysis that similarly supports that return in our region?
Tēnā koe, Councillor Waitoa. I'm afraid I do need to fall on my sword a little bit there. I actually took that from the land use transitions in Tairāwhiti business case. It actually relates to some international research that was done looking at the cost-benefit analysis of disaster risk management opportunities. And it does mention flooding and landslides, but it's not specific to soil conservation, so I do need to apologise for that. Locally, I'm not aware of anything recently. I do know that after the 2011 event that we had, there was some cost-benefit analysis work done on the storm impacted areas along the southern coast. But it was using an ecosystem services approach, and it was about what that cost benefit was to landowners. So it didn't take into account the kind of the wider community and social values as well.
Can we come back to you, Councillor Waitoa, if we have time? Councillor McIntosh.
Yes, so in the report, I think I've read that in areas that are planted, there's been a 7% reduction in sediment ending up in the river. Is that right?
Yeah, that was from one of our other reports done by Manaaki Whenua, yep.
And associated with that is a 10% reduction in slips in areas that are planted, I think. Actually, this isn't my question, but those numbers seem really conservative to me, but we can talk about that later. Alongside that, we have intel at the moment where you could rock up to a farm at the moment and say, look, mate, you need to plant here, here, and here, and don't worry about that, and so on, and put in these trees. So you could come up with a pretty good package for them. So, and you know what impact that's going to have on sediment in the rivers, i.e. those percentages. So actually, we've got quite a lot of intel, haven't we?
Could I hand that over to Richard? Do you want to just touch on what we're doing in that space very briefly?
Sorry, I was just
asking a question in the air.
Sorry, the question was around what we're doing. We've got a lot of intel, and how are we shaping up to farmers and saying this is the best place for you to put those poles. Is that right?
So my question was, we know the impact it has on sediment load in the river. We know the impact it has on reducing floods. we've got intel to know where you should plant and where you shouldn't for most benefit on your farm. So kind of what else do we need? The economic side is really important too, I get that.
Yeah. So it's a combination. So yes, we have all the information. I guess what we're looking at now is what's the methodology for us to engage with those? How do we go about engaging with those landowners to create awareness and knowledge of what to do and where to do it? And I guess to some degree it was in the earlier paper, Andrew Russell touched on it when he talked about the peer-to-peer learning in terms of the opportunity. So I guess in terms of next-gen land management, we're using the knowledge and awareness of the information in terms of where we know the challenges are, and then how do we work with those communities, both in terms of making product available to them to address their issues, but also the information and knowledge in terms of how to go about it. So that's the how we will do that, how we will actually translate that information.
I had a couple of follow-ups, but I'll ask them later.
Yeah, we might come back to you if that's okay. I've got a question. So you mentioned in the paper, or what I'm reading is the picture, is that we're moving away from having 30, 50, 60 ISCOs measuring detail across all our different catchments. We're moving to a more modelled approach. And you mention in the paper about the representative catchments. So two questions. One, are these real catchments or are they more of like an averaged catchment? And if they are real catchments, how do you choose or decide which are the catchments that will be representative of who they're representing?
Is that on? Yeah. We've had a lot of debate around this over the last 6 months in the focus groups. They will be real catchments. For example, the Waikatuku one, which you can see in that picture there, it's a really useful site because you can see up on the hill there, the robinias they're probably only about, say, 15 years old, and then you've got forestry up the back. So you do need to have monitoring in the real catchments. And then where applicable, we can apply that to the greater district. So that's why we're trying to go for one in the north, one in the central, and one in the south. We also worked out through the mapping what the density was for certain subcatchments. So, okay, what's the density of erosion? So we'll go, okay, is it particularly flat and doesn't need much work? We'll discard that. So we're trying to find places where it was needed the most, but also based on what we had done in the past, so where we've done planting, where there was already vegetation there. And so we're weighing up all of these different metrics to go, okay, where would we be able to measure this over, say, the next 20 to 30 years, rather than, in the Wairoa catchment example where, it take decades to actually see any results. We've stumbled across 3 at the moment, but I don't think we want to finalise those. I might just have to hand over to you guys to see where you would go with that.
It's probably an offline conversation. I don't want to put anybody stepping on any minefields at the Environment Committee this morning. Could we, one from you, Louise, and then we'll go back to you, Councillor Waitoa, with your, maybe we won't. We'll go to Chair Sears after this. Councillor Parsons.
Thank you. My question's in regards to point 8 as well with the cost. So I forgive you if you can't answer because you did die on your sword, which is pretty cool. But you talk about the $5 per tonne and 30 million tonnes, so 1 billion economic cost. So when we're talking about economic cost, are we talking about the removal of the silt, the loss of production? What are we talking about there?
So that $5 per tonne, that was a figure that I got from the recovery, so that did refer just to the cost of removing the silt, so it doesn't talk about what damage that silt did when it was in place.
Okay, so getting back to Councillor Waitoa's question, so the $1 that we spend or invest to prevent the silt, we save $4 or not?
That's correct. That's based on that international research, and it was disaster risk management across a range of different kind of disasters. So it did refer to flooding and it did refer to landslides, but it would be very general. It probably includes earthquakes and all sorts of things.
It would be interesting to see the figure for Hawke's Bay. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'd be happy to do a bit of research to see if that information was actually available from a broader production sense, because I think one of the opportunities we have, particularly in thinking about next-gen land management into the future, is what's the impact of soil erosion from a wider production perspective as well. And we just might need to think about that.
And we are definitely all about our bang for our buck. If we're spending, what's the value proposition?
Kia ora, thank you. Through you, Chair, I might sound a bit slow, but I just want to get it clear in my mind. We've used the ISCOs to understand sediment loading, but they're also used to measure change. So we're using them to find out where most of the sediment's coming, but now we have these other tools as well that's confirming what we were seeing in the monitoring. Then we're also using them because we have this continuous monitoring, so we can see change in the catchment where there's been no intervention or mass intervention, right? So they do two jobs. And the proposal here is that we take most of those monitorings out, or most are out anyway because we lost so many ISCOs in Cyclone Gabrielle. We take particular catchments that you've debated forever on what are going to be the most representative. And those catchments we will have then a direct understanding because we will maintain continuous monitoring, right? So all the other catchments, we will ground truth at some stage, or we can do spot monitoring, or you think that this proposal, the way we take the representative pieces, will be so good that we can apply it then to all the other places by association, by geography, by what we know through landslide, etc., etc. And of course, you'll understand what I'm worrying about. What we're not measuring, we can't monitor, and are we losing? How do we know we're not going to lose too much? Because we also know this organisation has decades of continuous monitoring, which we've been warned about losing before. So.
And I guess that's why I touched on the state of the environment monitoring, right? Because they are dual purpose, and we would still like to keep a network of ISCOs down at the bottom of the catchment for SOE monitoring. So we do capture, say, for example, the Tuki Tuki, the Parongaho, the Wairau, and we can actually use that information against those treatments the treated catchments, and we'll have a better understanding of what their relationship is. But also bring in the water quality data too, because they're out there collecting heaps of information, and they've got over 100 sites if you include some of the smaller sites, and we can look at those sites as well and go, okay, well, should we model across this whole region and go, what is our main concern and how is it improving?
Thank you, team. Appreciate your report and that you are thinking very pragmatically about how we move forward in this space, and I strongly suspect you will be coming back with more intel for us. We have a recommendation on the table that the Environment Committee receives, notes the introduction to soil conservation evaluation methods. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Waitoa, seconder, please. Councillor McIntosh. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much, team. And a reminder that this team have set up an ISCO outside, so during our lunchtime you can get down and, dare I say it, get down and dirty outside with that piece of equipment, so thank you for bringing that in. Could I invite, we're moving on to our next paper. Thank you, Rachel. And Richard, are you introducing? Thank you. So there's a whole lot of information in your pack, so you'll need to flip all the way nearly to the end where this paper is, on page 90 of the agenda. And Rachel, I do apologise, we have gone over time, so we are looking at around 10 minutes, please.
I'll talk really fast.
With time for
lunch break now.
For
Madam Chair, are we?
Mine says 12:05.
Or are you moving?
11:55.
Are we
You're
up to
moving a
item?
paper forward.
We haven't had Or do you want to do this after lunch?
Well, I'm just looking at the run sheet.
Okay, this is actually different from the one I was looking at over here.
Can you say it again, please?
Yeah, having
Okay.
a shock at you.
Rough.
I love it, love it. Okay.
Settle down, Deputy.
So, our alternative is we could do this and then we can move into public excluded and then on with, is that okay?
Up to you, Chair.
Yep, you're the
It
chair.
feels like that's a sensible, pragmatic approach to release Rachel and our sound man as we move into public exclude. So, well, with your blessing, we'll push lunch out to about 15:15. And so about sort of less than 10 minutes with Rachel, so we've got a chance to ask you some questions. I know there'll be some burning ones. Please.
Kia ora. So, thank you, Chair, and this is an opportunity for us to bring a paper and a very short presentation on Land for Life. You'll be aware that Land for Life has had a high profile in our council, and this report is on the Sustainable Farming and Future Farming Fund agreement that we entered into in December 2024, which was an agreement between MPI, HBRC, and included an involvement of the Nature Conservancy, but the contract or the agreement, funding agreement, was principally between the Crown and HBRC. So what we're presenting today is a report on stage 3 of the project, and where we've got to, and recent decisions that have been made to pause the MPI contract. So I'd like to introduce Kelly Burkett, who is Manager of Biomanagement, which is the biosecurity, biodiversity, and includes the project lead for Land for Life, and Rachel Agnew, who is Senior Rural Advisor, Land for Life, to take us through the paper today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So kia ora koutou. I am talking to you today on the Land for Life project, as Richard has said, specifically the stage 3 part of the project, which was is the funding agreement between HBRC and the MPI. So really this presentation in the paper that you accompanies this is looking at what we set out to test with the stage 3 project of Land for Life, what we learnt from it, and what comes next. So I guess for a little bit of context, and I know we're in time, but we talk about stage 3, but in context, stage 1 was around extensive research for Land for Life and a lot of background information. Stage 2 was around testing, it was around evaluation and the development of a very comprehensive business case that kind of put together a model of how Land for Life was going to work, and that formed the basis of the funding application to MPI in order to progress to stage 3. So what we're going to look at with stage 3 and the purpose of today is to really emphasise that stage 3 was a feasibility test, not a delivery program. We're going to look at the fact that stage 3 was designed to answer if the Land for Life model that was developed in the business case was able to be scaled under the current market conditions, and then demonstrate what value we've actually got from HBRC in terms of the process that we've been through and what we've been able to validate. So I won't go too much into this because it's been in all of the presentations this morning, we've talked about this. We're facing significant challenges in our region. So I guess the why behind Land for Life and why it was born was that we're recognising that farmers don't have the ability to face this by themselves. Business as usual for farmers and for landowners was not enough, and Land for Life was an attempt to find a better system to deal with this. One of the things that is, I guess underpins this is that on the ground change requires capital, and it's a huge constraint. And this was one of the key concepts that the Land for Life project was attempting to address. So I've talked about the fact that Land for Life was testing a model. So what was the model that Stage 3 process of Land for Life was trying to test? So there were three concepts to the Land for Life model that were developed in the business case. These included a finance facility, a technical assistance facility, and an implementation facility. So this was, in essence, the Land for Life model. So the finance facility was a funding mechanism in which the private capital funds would fund the on-farm investments required for those on-ground change. So the concept of that finance facility was around aggregating and distributing capital from that private capital, so banks and philanthropic funding would feed into. So that entity would distribute capital to farmers to fund that on-farm works. So that finance facility was led by the Nature Conservancy. The technical assistance facility, which was led by HBRC, was around the technical expertise and support for landowners to actually implement that change. So it was around the farm planning, around coordination, a lot of work into extension, research, monitoring and evaluation, and that was led by HBRC. And the implementation facility was, the purpose of that was actually implementing the on-farm works. So that was going to be all the contractors, the nurseries, planting, and that was also led by the Nature Conservancy, but was completely dependent on the successful validation of that finance facility. So what have we been able to successfully validate from the project so far? So successful validation of the whole farm business planning process. It has been, we have had really, really overwhelmingly positive engagement from the landowners that we're working with. They buy into the concept. They know that it is important for them to understand how the financial basis of their system can kind of be profitable but still balance those environmental impacts. So that has been a real success. We've got some great guidelines. We've been able to engage the consultants and have a really successful process for that farm business plan process. We've partnered with 2 catchment groups to develop catchment strategy, Land for Life catchment strategies, and they're about kind of bringing in that community-led long-term vision and action. And the 2 catchment groups that we're working with are there in the photos. We've got Toki Toki Land Care and the Karakia Catchment Collective, and they are both looking at the project quite differently, but some really exciting work coming out of both of those groups. And I think what's really important is when you're looking at it from that catchment space, the engagement from the landowners in the community has been, it's been really, really positive. And I guess following on from that, you know, the engagement process that HBRC has run through the past 12 months has been, we've had some really awesome relationships and trusted relationships with landowners. There's also a huge bunch of internal capability in terms of, you know, if you look at the farm business planning process that we've got, we've got a really good understanding of what works and what doesn't. We've worked with the science team here in Hawke's Bay Regional Council to develop monitoring and research and verification frameworks. We've got some really good extension frameworks and work done there. So I guess overall what we have successfully validated is that the technical assistance facility of this project that HBRC was leading has been a success and been really welcomed by our rural communities. But there have been constraints. So the finance facility could not be validated. So this was the facility that the Nature Conservancy was leading. This was based on their global kind of finance expertise. And the reason that this could not be validated was due to external factors. So when I talked about the facility before, I talked about the platform that would kind of aggregate the capital that banks would kind of lend into. So that mechanism needed to have a government guarantee in order for the banks to lend the money into it. And that wasn't, we were unable to get a government guarantee. It's also really important to note that when the business case for this project was written, it was 2021, 2022. So the philanthropic capital market is significantly different now to when it was back then, as is the carbon and sustainable finance market. And the testing that TNC did in both of those spaces really showed right now that it wasn't feasible to be standing this kind of finance facility up at the moment. The implementation facility couldn't be validated because it was dependent on the finance facility being successfully validated. So without the successful validation of the finance facility, it did lead to the withdrawal of the Nature Conservancy from the Land for Life partnership. Their role was very specific and very time-bound to implement this finance facility. And as I've talked about in the previous slide, the inability to stand that finance model up, it was based on external factors. It wasn't a failure of the project partnership. It was based on the fact that they were unable to see a feasible way to move forward with the design that was put in the business case at this point in kind of our global and economic conditions. So they identified the risk early. They couldn't find a way to pivot in which they could add value to the project going forward, and that really has underpinned their withdrawal. So it really reflects prudent risk management as opposed to any project failure. So I guess the MPI contract variation led from the inability to stand up that finance model because it really did change the scope of what the project was attempting to validate. So MPI recognised those limits. And importantly, they chose to vary the contract, and their decision to vary the contract kind of reflects that they could see the value that the technical assistance facility that we'd been working on, so that the farm planning, the catchment strategies, and the landowner engagement actually had a lot of value to add to our landowners and our communities. So while the variation has significantly reduced some of those deliverables, it is maintaining that ability to deliver that value and enables us to keep the value of those insights and those learnings. And I guess really, really importantly, MPI is still sitting at the table with us, and that is important. We have a really strong relationship with MPI, and they have supported this project and continue to support this project right through. So that is a really important point to note. So some key insights. I think, scaling environmental outcomes is primarily a capital problem. We know that farmers are willing and want the change, but they also need and are looking for capital to help them do that. We know that at catchment scale, we can see greater impact when these changes are led by a community and led at a scale that can really impact those environmental outcomes. And really importantly, I've talked about the stage 3 being a feasibility test. So what we have tested here has, provided some key insights around the ability to be able to provide that capital. We've tested a model and it wasn't able to be validated. and that does save future sunk costs. And a really important key insight as well from that is I was at a catchment group meeting a few weeks ago, and the conversation when you're talking about on-farm works always comes back to we need help with the capital. We need help with the capital, and we're actually able to have a conversation with landowners around, well, yes, that is recognised, but we've actually been able to test this. We've spent 18 months testing how to provide capital, and at this point we can't. So it's actually a really good conversation to be able to have with farmers and landowners to be able to say we've looked at options and they're not there right now. So the strategic value to HBRC from what we've learned. So I think HBRC can lead where it has control, and that is around engagement and extension, the planning, coordination and monitoring and evaluation. So we've got good farm planning methodology now. We've tested that. We know that we've got some really good evidence from our farm plans and the work with the catchment groups around the erosion control targeting. We've got really strong catchment group relationships. And as I talked about before, a market realistic understanding of finance limits for us right now. Dr. Ash and Warwick talked about the next generation land management framework. Land for Life has actually been able to provide some really valuable insights into how that's framed and how that can become operational. So you could call it a bit of a test bed. And those insights are around kind of that farm planning methodology. They're around the extension work as well. We've done really quite a lot of extension work as part of this project to work with landowners around what's important to them and what's going to help them adopt and engage in the on-ground works to get the practice change. So strong relationships, insights and tools, and all of these will feed into the development of the next generation land management project going forward. So in summary, Land for Life did exactly what HBRC asked it to do. It tested ambition against reality, learned quickly and left us stronger, clearer and better prepared for the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. A very important paper. I know there'll be lots of questions. I have a question. Councillor Parsons, then we'll go to Councillor Waitoa and then on to Mr. Gooten. In negotiations with government to get their support as guarantors, were they aware that $1 investment saves the economy $4? I know I keep coming back to that, but it's a no-brainer for me if we had that sort of evidence.
Through you, Chair, yes, those conversations in terms of the impact of this work were very much evidenced in the foundational business plan in terms of what it was actually setting out to do. And it is the underwriting the risk, and as you would expect, predominantly the target farms for Land for Life are those farms that are already challenged economically, whilst they're successful. And so I guess from a government perspective, it's actually the risk profile that some of this work actually presents itself as well.
Councillor Waitoa.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just a finance question, secondary with a risk angle. Following that presentation and point 15 on 93, also points 21 and 26, gives that stage 3 that you talked about, the cash funding figure of 2.27 million, including 400,000 from the TNC. Given the report later states on that point 21, I think it is, or 26, that TNC withdrew in December 25, and that this requires a formal variation to MP's contract. I just need clarification on whether that 2.7 million is an original budget figure, or is that a live funding position?
Through you, Chair, that figure of $2.27 million, that was the original agreement entered into with MPI, and obviously the variation to the agreement is reducing what that original figure was. So we're taking out the proposed contribution from what TNC would have contributed, and also what would have been raised from the corporate sponsorship as well. So it's changing, and it also reduces the amount of money that MPI are also contributing to the project. In doing so, and I guess as Rachel has alluded to in her presentation, there's been quite strong recognition from MPI in terms of the value of the work that has been commenced, and so there's been continued investment in ensuring that work is completed.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, and final word to you, Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from Councillor Waitoa, so just my reading of paragraph 15 in the paper, Richard, is 240k from HBRC to come.
So that's a combination of cash and in kind as well. So that's our continuing contribution to.
Okay. Have you got a sense of what we've spent to date
on this stage?
No, the whole schmozzle.
I would need to go back and look at those numbers outside, because we've just focused on the stage 3 at this stage.
I appreciate that, but what we've got here is a summation of like the state of play of the project as it is now, and we are looking to continue into phase 3 and expend cash in kind of 240. We wouldn't be out of the way to suggest that we're talking over the 4-year period, over $1 million worth of HBRC contribution to the project so far, cash in kind.
I would have to validate that.
Can we get that figure back at some point? So my questions really sit around where we are now, and I'm wanting to know whether these are, in your words, sunk costs. They look like sunk costs to me. Around are these intangibles, these, if you like, these benefits, these insights, these internal capability, extension work, are these intangible benefits? Where do they sit? Who holds the knowledge now?
HBRC.
And what risks are sitting there when we move on at the end of the year or whenever it is, when staff move on, and it sits there. It has the look and feel of Ruatana for 2 to me, but let's explore that a bit.
Through you, Chair, these I guess the insights and the learnings that we've had from this project, and as Rachel alluded to, these become the foundations for next-gen land management. So in terms of the farm planning and the learning that we've gained, so all of that knowledge, all of that awareness sits as part of the precision intervention for next-gen land management. In terms of the catchment strategies, so that very much sits as part of next-gen land management around our catchment engagement, particularly around erosion control for next-gen land management. So whilst they are termed intangibles in the context of land for life, in the context of HBRC, they're quite foundational for the next stage of our erosion control program. So they are it's not work that we actually have to go and start again.
For supplementary, Madam Chair, just if we could get a summation of the costs and how we intend to preserve the intangible assets that we've got, how we actually make sure that we retain value and don't lose it, because from my experience, this sort of knowledge and experience walks out the door if we're not careful.
I think that's a really great, if you could take that away,
yes.
And feedback, that'd be really valuable to us all. This is really important, so we are going over time, so very quickly to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, only to add, I think what would be useful in this table alongside this very specific piece, which is important, is what's actually been delivered on the ground for the investment or co-investment to date, not just the intangibles, but the amount of farms now in the program, what's been delivered. Granted, and see where the spend's gone. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will conclude our.
Trying to move it for the paper.
I will hand over to.
Just one very brief comment. I think through you, Chair, one of the things that RM reform and replacement does, and is probably less talked about at the moment, is it puts a very strong emphasis on private property rights, and in doing so on private businesses to do the right thing environmentally. And it will call, I think, into question the degree to which taxpayers, through government subsidies and ratepayers, are then able to subsidise the costs of doing business, in this case in Hill Country. That's going to be a philosophical question that RM reform has put pretty strongly on the table.
And it shifts the language from value to cost. And our investment into that value. So thank you all for your attendance this morning.
Moving the paper.
We are going to move the paper. The recommendation is that the Environmental Committee receives and notes the Land for Life staff report. We have a mover and a seconder, please. Thank you. Councillor Albany and Councillor Cook-Kinsley, second. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried, thank you. So thank you for your attendance this morning. I hope it's been a really mindful morning and it has triggered lots of thoughts within your head. It's a really complex way of that we need to navigate, and these all feed into our decisions as we move into our annual plan and our long-term plan. And absolutely, Councillor Parsons, you're right on the money. We need to be really clear about those decisions that we're making. These are the foundation blocks for those decisions. Could I hand over to Councillor Waitoa to close us out with Karakia?
Tēnā koutou mō tēnei hui, mō o kōrero pono, kōrero kaha, kōrero aroha. He karakia whaka motu nā, kia motu a mātou mai. Kia motu a mātou mahi mō tēnei wā. Mana ki te mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau. A i o ki te orangi, tihei mauri ora.
Kia ora, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.